All right. Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Dorian Wallace, and this is This Machine Kills Fascists, a podcast where we talk about fascism and activism in the current era. So, yeah, today is another day that we are going to be reading an article. And this article is another one that is on my Substack called Engaged, Not Entangled. It will be in the show notes if you want to read along. Um, okay, cool. So it goes like this. Engaged, not entangled, walking through the fire. Liberation work is hard. Often we don't see the impact of our efforts. And even when we do, the cost can be heavy. Splintered relationships, financial insecurity, being pushed out of employment, incarcerated, or even killed. Bearing witness to violence, abandonment, and systemic harm leaves marks on your psyche and your nervous system. Burnout, PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, moral injury, compassion fatigue, secondary trauma. These are not abstract terms. They live in the body. They shape how we sleep, how we show up, how we hold each other, and how long we can keep going. In today's post, I want to share how I stay spiritually grounded amid some of the traumas that I've witnessed. So, sitting with someone as they take their final breath in hospice care, witnessing a mass stabbing involving several participants in an incarcerated group that I facilitate, or hearing graphic details as a survivor recounts being sex trafficked by their priest as a child. So, staying grounded has meant building a spiritual practice that can hold the weight of what I've seen and heard. So, these experiences stay with me, and I know they will for a long time. Combined with the daily pressures of life, they've pushed me into burnout more than once. I've experienced compassion fatigue. I live with PTSD, depression, and anxiety, and I've struggled with alcohol abuse for much of my adult life. I'm 5 years sober now, but yeah. And still, I can't look away from the suffering without engaging with it. So I've had to unlearn things, relearn things, and build firm boundaries about what I can carry. Spirituality. So spirituality can mean many things, but for our purposes, it refers to the embodied and relational process of connecting to something greater than the self. So I've found the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, to be deeply helpful in offering meaning, ethical grounding, and resilience in the face of suffering, impermanence, and interdependence. I don't consider myself a devout Buddhist, and honestly, I even hesitate to use the label. I do meditate in the Vipassana tradition and I do study core Buddhism concepts, but when I refer to myself as a Buddhist in passing, it never fully resonates. And part of it's because I do investigate other spiritual paths and other spiritual traditions, and as well as secular uh, practices and secular humanist philosophies. So, anyways, my orientation is more accurately described as a socialist, humanist, cosmopolitan universalism. And still, I find deep resonance in Buddhist ethics centered on liberation, compassion, and commitment. And that said, I just want to be clear about what I mean by spirituality and where I'm coming from. So the big part, the big important concept I really want to get out is engaged and entangled. So it's really important to remember that trauma is not a competition. No one wins by carrying more trauma, and no one is less than for carrying less. Trauma is trauma. As liberation practitioners, we must hold space for that truth with compassionate action and humility. One just example that I want to give is anytime I speak about the my experience working with the prisons and talk about some of the things I've seen there. I was literally speaking to a cult expert, and their response was, "Wow, us cult survivors really sound like a bunch of wimps," as if it was a competition on who was more traumatized in their lifetime, a survivor of a cult or a member in a street organization, what we often call gangs. And it as somebody who has worked with both groups, I don't find either one to be uh more traumatized or less traumatized than the other. I think they're both equally traumatized for different things in different ways, and every individual within those groups is also traumatized by slightly different things and has different experiences. But anyways, the reason I point this out is oftentimes people assume that their trauma, if they're not a narcissist or not somebody struggling with another personality disorder, but oftentimes when expressing your own trauma, there is a sense of, well, my trauma isn't really trauma, not after what, whoever the you is. I describe it this way, and then I'll get back to reading the text, but I describe it this way to folks. You can be a gangbanger from the projects, one of the project buildings in Brooklyn, New York, uh, and growing up around all the gang violence and been associated with that community. You can have all of that and still be a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. You can be an upper class white professional, attorney or doctor, and you can be a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. It doesn't matter on the sociological element on if a person can be traumatized or is traumatized. Now, we do have to apply a social analysis. It's extremely important that we as liberation practitioners consider the social analysis as well as the positionality. But anyways, back to what I'm speaking on. So one of the most important lessons I've learned is the difference between being engaged and being entangled in this work. To be engaged is to enter suffering with clarity, presence, and boundaries. To be entangled is to lose your sense of self in the suffering, carried away by it, consumed by it, unable to find solid ground. So an analogy I often return to is, imagine you're jumping into a burning building. And if you are entangled is running in with no protective gear, no plan, no awareness of your limits, just desperation to help, even if it kills you. Engaged is still jumping in, but you have put on fireproof clothing, you have support from others, and you have a deep understanding of the risks. Both are noble, but only one is sustainable, and only one leaves you able to support more people tomorrow. This is just a way to think about it. So entanglement isn't necessarily a choice. The conditions of our lives, poverty, systemic injustice, trauma, generational caretaking, survival pressures, all of these entangle us whether we want them to or not. We can't always pause. We can't always retreat. We can't always afford self-care, in air quotes. Even naming the entanglement can be an act of reclaiming some agency. The point is not to shame entanglement, but to recognize it so that we can begin to reclaim our energy, restore our boundaries, and remember that we are not the fire. We are the ones walking through it. This distinction has been essential for my survival and integrity in this work, and I continue to revisit it. So here are 3 concepts grounded in Buddhism, and I use these daily right now. Just in my daily practice, I have some sort of this going on just right now. Yeah, so 3 concepts grounded in Buddhism. First concept is called the Five Remembrances. So the Five Remembrances from the Ubaj-Hatana Sutta is a reflection practice on the nature of impermanence. And these remembrances, they help me stay grounded in reality, the reality of aging, the reality of illness, the reality of death, the reality of change, the reality of responsibility or commitment is another way to put it. So I do keep a paper slip by my bed. Let me see. Actually, I might even have one. This is the stuff I bring to hospice care, just to give you an example for those of you that are watching. Let's see. I've got to have a thing in here of it. Yeah, there it is. The 5 remembrances. I have them right here, just as a reminder. But yeah, I keep a slip of paper by my bed. I write them in my notebooks. I carry a slip in my pocket, not right now because I'm at home. And I read them daily, sometimes silently, sometimes aloud. I just have it written around, so I just see it. It's not, it's a way to kind of sink into my psyche. And when I need it, I turn to a simplified version that speaks more directly to my somatic self or my heart. Is a way to put it. But the 5 remembrances, so the traditional translation goes like this: I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love is of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. And so a simplified version, and I forget where I picked this one up from, but goes, I will grow old. I will get sick. I will die. Everything and everyone I love will change and eventually be lost. My actions are all I truly own. So this is it's a grounding exercise. Now I want to get into this. This is the 14 Precepts of Engaged Buddhism. So we talked about the 5 remembrances, and now the second piece that I want to share is the 14 Precepts of Engaged Buddhism. So engaged spirituality, just to get this out of the way, what that means is applying spiritual teachings to everyday life, especially in service of justice, healing, and or collective well-being or social well-being. So one example comes from Thich Nhat Hanh's 14 Precepts of Engaged Buddhism, which offers a powerful guide for living with deep social awareness and compassion. I actually have these up here on the wall in my my desk area. And I also keep these around, just various places. So though rooted in Buddhism, these precepts can resonate with anyone seeking to align their values with their actions, whether in activism, caregiving, creative practice, or community work. I keep copies of the precepts tucked into notebooks on my desk, folded in my bag. Some days I'll pick one at random to reflect on throughout the day. Other times I read through all 14, especially before entering prison, hospice, or any environment where there's a lot of trauma or suffering or a lot of vulnerability that's especially present. So sometimes I revisit a specific precept after a particularly heavy session or during research on as a grounding reminder of my intentions and responsibilities. So for instance, in the cult recovery work, when I learn about the cults, I try to do research on the groups that people come from, and sometimes it can become I just literally remind myself by checking these 14 precepts. I'll just glance through them or read through them, or maybe pick one at random before I start doing the research, because you can, especially, I don't know if everybody is like this, but I know that I get really sucked into things. I fall deep into rabbit holes. And so this is a way to remind me not to get too sucked into learning about a group, because sometimes it can be depressing when you start to learn about just some of the experiences people went through, and you start to learn names to faces of allegations, and just, yeah, all those sorts of things. So you just gotta learn about all these yeah, I like this. So anyways, the 14 precepts, and I did not write these, Thich Nhat Hanh wrote these, but do not be idolatrous about or bound to any doctrine, theory, or ideology, even Buddhist ones. Buddhist systems of thought are guiding means. They are not absolute truth. That's precept 1. Precept 2. Do not think the knowledge you presently possess is changeless, absolute truth. Avoid being narrow-minded and bound to present views. Learn and practice non-attachment from views in order to be open to receive others' viewpoints. Truth is found in life and not merely in conceptual knowledge. Be ready to learn throughout your entire life and to observe reality in yourself and in the world at all times. Precept 3. Do not force others, including children, by any means whatsoever to adopt your views, whether by authority, threat, money, propaganda, or even education. However, through compassionate dialogue, help others renounce fanaticism and narrow-mindedness. Precept 4. Do not avoid suffering or close your eyes before suffering. Do not lose awareness of the existence of suffering in the life of the world. Find ways to be with those who are suffering, including personal contact, visits, images, and sounds. By such means, awaken yourself and others to the reality of suffering in the world. Number 5, do not accumulate wealth while millions are hungry. Do not take aim at your life. Do not take as the aim of your life fame, profit, wealth, or sensual pleasure. Live simply and share time, energy, and material resources with those who are in need. Precept 6. Do not maintain anger or hatred. Learn to penetrate and transform them when they are still seeds in your consciousness. As soon as they arise, turn your attention to your breath in order to see and understand the nature of your hatred. Number 7, do not lose yourself in dispersion and in your surroundings. Practice mindful breathing to come back to what is happening in the present moment. Be in touch with what is wondrous, refreshing, and healing both inside and around you. Plant seeds of joy, peace, and understanding in yourself in order to facilitate the work of transformation in the depths of your consciousness. Precept 8. Do not utter words that can create discord and cause the community to break. Make every effort to reconcile and resolve all conflicts, however small. Number 9, do not say untruthful things for the sake of personal interest or to impress people. Do not utter words that cause division and hatred. Do not spread news that you are not, do not spread news that you do not know to be certain. Do not criticize or condemn things of which you are not sure. Always speak truthfully and constructively. Have the courage to speak out about situations of injustice, even when doing so may threaten your own safety. Precept 10. Do not use the Buddhist community for personal gain or profit, or transform your community into a political party. A religious community, however, should take a clear stand against oppression and injustice, and should strive to change the situation without engaging in partisan conflicts. Precept 11. Do not live with a vocation that is harmful to humans and nature. Do not invest in companies that deprive others of the chance to live. Select a vocation that helps realize your ideal of compassion. Precept 12. Do not kill. Do not let others kill. Find whatever means possible to protect life and prevent war. Precept 13. Possess nothing that should belong to others. Respect the property of others, but prevent others from profiting from human suffering or the suffering of other species on earth. And precept 14. Do not mistreat your body. Learn to handle it with respect. Do not look on your body as only an instrument. Preserve vital energies, sexual, breath, spirit, for the realization of the way, for brothers and sisters who are not monks and nuns. Sexual expression should not take place without love and commitment. In sexual relationships, be aware of future suffering that may be caused. To preserve the happiness of others, respect the rights and commitments of others. Be fully aware of the responsibility of bringing new lives into the world. Meditate on the world into which you are bringing new beings. Thich Nhat Hanh. And the last piece that I'd like to read for spiritual grounding on engaged and entangled practices, how to become more engaged, but within the Buddhist concepts is the Bodhisattva Path. So here's how this goes. The Bodhisattva Path. In archetypal psychology, myths reflect patterns of human experience we collectively carry. Archetypes like the hero, shadow, or jester offer symbolic ways to understand our emotions, behaviors, and responses. They don't need to be precisely named or categorized. They're simply tools to help us frame our perspective. Recognizing which archetype is active in a given moment can support self-awareness, emotional regulation, and intentional self-care. This practice helps us stay grounded, balanced, and connected to our values. One archetype that holds deep resonance, especially in the context of healing and justice work, is the Bodhisattva. In Buddhist mythology, the Bodhisattva is a figure who, upon awakening to the possibility of personal liberation, chooses to stay in the world to help ease the suffering of others. This isn't about being a savior, it's about walking in genuine, authentic, love, and solidarity. So the Bodhisattva teaches us to hold both personal and collective pain with care, discernment, and healthy boundaries. So for those of us who've experienced trauma, especially systemic harm, betrayal trauma, or moral injury, it can be easy to confuse self-sacrifice with love. We may find ourselves absorbing pain that isn't ours to carry. That's why self-care is sacred in this work. The Bodhisattva doesn't bypass suffering or deny its presence. They bear witness to it, grounded in compassion, while still honoring their own dignity and wholeness. To embody the Bodhisattva archetype as a trauma survivor means learning to rest, to set boundaries, and to remember liberation is a collective process. We're not here to save others. We're here to walk beside them. Before entering spaces heavy with trauma, like prisons or hospice, I often ground myself in the Bodhisattva archetype, not as a saint, but as a companion. The Bodhisattva Path teaches that true fulfillment comes from serving others alongside ourselves. It is not about martyrdom, it's not about saviorism, but it's a radical commitment to stay present in a suffering world with compassion, boundaries, and service. So the Bodhisattva vow is a sacred one. And it goes like this: sentient beings are numberless. I vow to liberate us all. Taken literally, this sounds impossible, but it's not about individual heroism. This is where it conceptually gets in. It's rooted in the understanding that we are all interdependent. As the Buddha said, there is no I and other, only us. So this means that you have your time, that you are in a space in which you may be facilitating or you may be active. Just be aware you're not solving everything. There are other people engaging. This is a larger practice. If you don't have relations with the other folks that might come through a space, try to find them, try to build those connections. If not, also trust that there are works happening. It's easier said than done. I realize all of this, but these are just concepts that I use to help stay grounded. So to live as a bodhisattva means cultivating the 10 paramitas, which are the perfections, which unfold through 10 bhumis, or stages. So the 10 stages are joyful, or pramudita, which is the bodhisattva feels joy in beginning the path and commits to helping others. Number 2, purity, or vimala, the perfection of ethical discipline, purifying actions and intentions. Just so people are familiar, if you're not familiar with reading Buddhist text, the term purifying it's not about draining things or making things clean. It's about letting things arise and pass away so that they fall away naturally. So it just for some clarity on what the technical term means when we say purifying, because since there's a podcast that talks about fascism, when you hear purity from a fascist, yeah, they don't mean the same thing as when a Buddhist says it. So anyways, purity, purifying actions and intentions. Number 3, radiant, prabhakari, which is cultivating patience and tolerance even amid harm or hardships. Number 4, flaming, arkismati, energetic, perseverance and inner strength to stay on the path. Number 5, difficult to conquer, or sudajyaha, deepening meditative stability and non-reactivity. Number 6, approaching, or abhimukhi, attaining insight, wisdom that sees reality clearly. At this stage, the bodhisattva has the option to leave the cycle of suffering, but chooses to stay. So this is where it is in at least the bodhisattva archetype. It is at this stage. Number 7, gone afar, the Durangama, skillful means learning to help others with discernment and flexibility. So how do you navigate through a space in a fluid way? How do you engage with the participants, with the community members? Do you greet people? Do you make people feel warm? All of this is important. Unshakable or akala. This is full mastery of vows and unwavering commitment to all beings. Then we have number 9, the excellent intellect or sadamati. And this is spiritual power and deep intuitive understanding of interdependence. This is, you are aware on a hyper level of the interdependence of the world around us. And then finally, number 10 of the Bodhisattva vows is the cloud of Dharma. Well, Dharma is how it's written because Sanskrit, but my Buddhist practice tends to use the Pali words instead of the Sanskrit words. So when I say Dharma, I say Dhamma. It's, yeah, I'm not fluent in Pali, but it's just a thing that I mess up with sometimes when reading the English words. So cloud of Dharma or Dhamma Mega. The Bodhisattva becomes a living expression of the Dharma. The Bodhisattva becomes a living expression of the Dharma, preparing for full Buddhahood. And I often return to this grounding invocation before and after challenging sessions. Literally, like when I was at Rikers Island, I would say this in the car before going in, and I'd say it in the car when coming out. But may I be present. May I stay grounded. May I hold pain without absorbing it. May I act in love without erasure. You can take what that means. You can read into however you need to for your own practice. So conclusions. These are the practices that I return to. They're shaped by years of collective struggle, personal collapse, deconstruction, rebuilding, ongoing reprocessing. While my path draws deeply from the Buddhist tradition, I understand spirituality as an active process of reconnecting to our shared humanity, our interdependence, and our responsibility to one another. So it can take place in many forms: liberation theology, the various religious socialisms, progressive faith communities, indigenous teachings, workers' cooperatives, the mutual aid or secular humanist practices grounded in compassion, respect, and accountability. The form matters less than whether it helps us stay rooted in love and principled in action and connected to something beyond the individual, much larger than just ourselves. We have a whole species that we're here to work with and care for. And so it lightens the burden that we carry alone. Nurturing a spiritual life, whatever that means for you, is part of the resistance. It's how we embody our dignity. It's how we protect our joy and keep showing up for each other without burning out or succumbing to fascism. With that being said, this is This Machine Kills Fascists. I'm your facilitator, Dorian Wallace, he, him. We'll catch you all later. See you next time. Peace.